Welcome, and thank you for being here tonight. Let the room grow soft and dim around you, the way a deep cavern grows quiet when the last echo finally fades. There is nothing you need to solve before morning, nothing you have to carry down into the dark with you. You can set it all down now gently, the way a tired warrior sets down a heavy blade at the end of a long watch. If you find this quiet hour helpful, you might leave a gentle like or tell me in a comment where you are drifting off from tonight, and then let even that small thought slip away into the hush. From here on, all you have to do is breathe and listen, and let the story carry you down through the roots of a fallen kingdom into a place where a proud and ancient people once held the line against the end of the world. Picture, if you will, a green and misty deep beneath the earth. Far below the surface of a ruined land, past the pale streets of a drowned city and the endless dripping of an underground rain, there is a place where great fungal growths rise like slow soft trees, where spores drift through the still air like the gentlest snow, where the light is dim and green and patient. This is the fungal wastes, a strange half-lit country grown up in the roots of the world, and if you follow its winding paths far enough, down and down toward the darker places, you come at last to a village carved into the stone. It is quiet now, in the way we will imagine it tonight. Quiet the way old battlegrounds are quiet, holding their pride and their sorrow in the same still air. This is the home of the Mantis tribe, and their story is one of the most quietly remarkable in the whole fallen kingdom, because they are the ones who did not fall. Before we go down among them, let us sit for a moment with where they came from, because their beginning is older than almost everything around them. The Mantis tribe are an ancient people, warriors born and bred, whose traditions reach back into a time before the great kingdom of Hallownest was ever founded, before the Pale King came down into the dark and raised his civilization of light and order over the older wild things. They were here first. They were here when the deep places belonged to no one but the creatures strong enough to hold them. And they held their patch of the dark with claw and lance, and an unbending pride that has never once bent in all the long ages since. To understand them, you have to understand that they are not a people who became warriors out of necessity. They are a people for whom being a warrior is simply what it means to be alive, woven so deep into who they are that they know no other way to stand in the world. Their village sits deep in the fungal wastes, a cluster of carved chambers and narrow ledges and quiet thrones, and it is not a gentle place, though there is a strange stern beauty to it. The mantises who live there are lithe and swift and deadly, built for the fight, their whole bodies shaped like weapons. And from the time they are young, they are expected to prove themselves. Their flying youths, the small quick ones who have not yet earned their place, are compelled by the traditions of the tribe to test their strength before they can be counted among the true warriors, so that no one becomes a mantis warrior simply by being born one. Strength is earned there, always, over and over, in a place where softness would not survive a single season. And ruling over all of it, from 3 quiet thrones at the very heart of the village, are the leaders of the tribe, the finest warriors of them all. 3 sisters known together as the Mantis Lords. The 3 sisters are the still centre of the whole proud people, and there is something almost serene about them despite the lethal skill they carry. They do not attack out of cruelty. They do not kill for pleasure. They sit their thrones and they watch, and they wait, and they test. Because to them the world is understood through combat the way another people might understand it through words or trade or worship. When a stranger comes down into their village, the tribe treats that stranger as an intruder, as any proud people guarding their ancient home would. And the Mantis warriors will move to drive the stranger out with everything they have. But woven into all that ferocity there is a code, an old and unbending sense of honour, and it is the most beautiful thing about them. If a stranger proves strong enough, if a wanderer can stand before the three sisters and best them in fair and open combat, then everything changes. The tribe does not resent it. They do not seek revenge. They bow. They grant the worthy stranger free passage through their lands, and treat that stranger, from then on, with a respect that never wavers. Strength, honestly earned, is the one language they honour above all others, and they honour it completely. Even the way the three sisters give battle is a study in their strange honour. When a worthy challenger stands before them, they do not simply fall upon the stranger all at once, 3 against 1, and overwhelm them by force of numbers. One rises first, alone, and tests the challenger by herself. A single lord against a single stranger, measuring their worth in fair and equal contest. Only when she has been bested does she return to her throne, and only then do the remaining 2 rise together to continue the test, raising the difficulty in honest stages rather than crushing the challenger outright. There is a deep fairness woven into that, a refusal to win cheaply, a sense that the point is not to defeat the stranger but to truly measure them, and that a measure taken by 3 at once against one exhausted foe would not be an honest measure at all. They could kill any intruder in an instant if killing were the goal. It is not the goal. The goal is the test, the true and fair assessment of worth, and they conduct it with the scrupulous honour of judges who care more about the rightness of the verdict than the ease of the victory. Even in the way they raise their claws, the mantises show you exactly what the infection would have destroyed: the capacity for fairness, for measured judgment, for a contest that means something. A husk swarms. The sisters test. That difference is everything. That fairness, that discipline, does not appear in a warrior fully formed. It is grown deliberately from the very beginning of a Mantis life, and the culture that grows it is the true secret of the tribe's unbreakable strength. Their young are not simply born into the warrior caste and handed a place in it. The flying youths of the tribe, the small quick ones not yet counted among the true warriors, are compelled by the oldest traditions of their people to prove themselves first, to test their strength and earn their standing before they can take their place among the adults. From their earliest days, then, a Mantis learns that nothing is given, that worth must be demonstrated. That strength and self-command are not inherited but forged. And in forging that strength, the young forge something deeper than mere fighting skill. They forge an identity so thoroughly earned, so completely their own, that nothing could ever talk them out of it. By the time a Mantis is a full warrior, they have spent their whole life becoming unmistakably themselves, and that lifelong becoming is exactly the armour the infection could not pierce. The tribe's resistance to the plague was not a lucky trait. It was the end result of a whole way of raising the young, generation after generation, each one taught from the cradle to be so fully and fiercely itself that there would never be any room inside it for something else to enter. They armoured their children against a plague they did not yet know was coming, simply by raising them to be strong in the one way that mattered, and when the plague finally came, the armour was already there, worn by every member of the tribe, fitted since childhood, unbreakable. There is a pride in them so deep that it once shaped the history of the whole kingdom. When the Pale King came and founded Hallownest, drawing the scattered peoples of the deep into a single ordered realm beneath his light, the Mantis tribe would not simply bow and join. Their pride would not allow it. They had held their lands since before his kingdom was even a dream, and they had no intention of surrendering that ancient sovereignty to a newcomer, however radiant, however powerful. And so, rather than a conquest, there was a negotiation. A truce struck between the old wild tribe and the new Pale Order. The Mantises would keep their domain. They would retain their independence, their traditions, their rule over their own patch of the dark. And in return, they would take up a duty that suited them perfectly, a duty that asked of them only the thing they were already best at in all the world. They would stand guard. For the Mantis village sits at a border, and the thing on the other side of that border is one of the most frightening places in the entire kingdom. Beyond the village, past a great and heavy gate, lies Deepnest, a vast tangled realm of absolute darkness, home to swift and hungry and predatory things, creatures of the deep that would pour out into the rest of the kingdom and devour it if anything were ever to let them through. Deepnest is old and cruel and patient, a place where the light of Hallownest never truly reached, and it presses always against its borders, always testing, always hungry. And the one thing standing between that ravenous dark and the soft bright heart of the kingdom was the Mantis tribe. The truce they struck was simple and grim. The king would leave them their freedom, and they would keep the beasts of Deepnest at bay. They would be the wall. They would be the held breath between the kingdom and the things that wanted to eat it. And for age after age, quietly, faithfully, without thanks and without fail, that is exactly what they did. You can still find, carved into the stone of their village, the old words that tell you who they are. And they are not gentle words, but they are honest ones. They greet wandering strangers with a grim and formal courtesy, telling any who come seeking death that they are welcome to it, that they may find a swift ending upon Mantis claws, a greeting that is somehow both a threat and a strange kind of respect, an acknowledgement that anyone who came this far came knowing the cost. And elsewhere in the stone there are quieter words, words that speak of the duty they never abandoned, that tell the world the truce still holds, that their vigil still stands, that the beasts are still kept at bay. Read those words in the hush of the empty village, and they land with a quiet weight, because by the time a wanderer finds them, so much of the kingdom has already fallen, and yet here. Still, carved in stone and held in living claw, the old promise endures. The truce remains, the vigil holds. Whatever else has been lost, the wall is still standing. It is worth being honest, though, about the nature of that vigil, because the story is honest about it, and the honesty makes the tribe more interesting rather than less. The Mantises did not guard the border out of love for Hallanest. They were never the kingdom's devoted servants, never its grateful subjects, never moved by loyalty to the Pale King or affection for the bright cities they shielded. They had opposed the founding of the kingdom in the first place, and their guarding of Deepnest was a term of a bargain, a duty accepted in exchange for their independence, not a gift freely given out of the goodness of their hearts. One could say fairly that their long defence of the kingdom was more a matter of honour than of heroism, a keeping of their word rather than a labour of love, and that had the bargain never been struck they might well have let the beasts of Deepnest do as they pleased. There is no warmth in it. There is only the iron resolve of a proud people who, having given their word, would sooner die than break it. And yet that, in its own hard way, is its own kind of magnificence. They did not guard the kingdom because they loved it. They guarded it because they had said they would. And a mantis does not go back on what a mantis has said. Their honour did not require affection. It only required a promise, and the promise was enough. That same cold discipline shows in the smallest details of how they carry themselves. The three sisters sitting their thrones do not leap up to attack every stranger who wanders in. They remain still. They watch. They wait to be challenged, and only then do they rise. If a wanderer approaches the great gate to Deepnest without first proving worthy, the sisters do not simply cut the intruder down in a rage. They give an order, and the gate is closed, calmly, deliberately, the door shut against one who has not earned the right to pass through it. There is a terrible composure in that, the composure of warriors so secure in their own strength that they feel no need to prove it unasked, who fight only when the fight has meaning, who kill without hesitation, but never without reason. It is the discipline of a people who have mastered themselves as completely as they have mastered the blade, and it is exactly that mastery of self, that total unshakable composure, that the infection could never find a way to crack. To understand what makes the Mantis tribe so quietly extraordinary, and to understand the question we are going to sit with tonight, we have to understand the thing they were standing against, the slow catastrophe that unmade almost everyone else. It is called the infection, and it is the great sorrow at the heart of the whole fallen kingdom, the plague that hollowed out a civilization and left it a country of the dreaming dead. But it is not a sickness of the body, not really, not in the way we usually mean. It does not begin in the blood or the shell, it begins in the mind and in the dream, and that is what makes it so terrible and so hard to fight. The infection flowed, in the end, from an old and forgotten god, a radiant being of light who had ruled the dreams of an ancient people long before the Pale King ever came. When that older god was set aside and buried in forgetting, she did not simply vanish. She lingered in the dreams of the kingdom, in the sleeping minds of its people, and slowly, patiently, out of longing and out of rage at being forgotten, she began to reach back into the waking world through the only door left to her, the door of sleep. And what came through that door was the infection, a creeping orange light that seeped into minds and filled them, that pooled in the eyes and swelled beneath the shell, and burned in the sleeping thoughts of ordinary bugs, until there was nothing left of who they had been. The infected did not merely sicken, they emptied. Their own minds went out like snuffed lamps, and what remained was a husk, a body still walking, still lashing out, but with no one home inside it anymore, only the light, only the will of the forgotten god wearing a stolen shape. That is the horror the kingdom faced, and it is why it fell so completely. You cannot reason with a plague of the mind. You cannot barricade a door against a sickness that comes through dreams. All across Hallownest, in the pale city and the green wastes, and the far dark corners, bugs lay down to sleep and woke as something else, their eyes gone orange, their thoughts gone silent, their bodies given over to a hunger and a rage that was not their own. Whole districts emptied of their people and filled instead with shambling husks. The lamps of the great city stayed lit over streets that no longer held anyone who could remember what the light was for. And the thing spread and spread, mind to mind, dream to dream, until the kingdom that the Pale King had built to last forever was little more than a beautiful ruin full of glowing empty shells. It was, in the end, a plague against which almost nothing could stand, because the one thing it attacked was the one thing that makes a person at all. It took the self, it took the mind, it left the body walking and took everything that had lived inside it. Almost nothing could stand against it. Almost. And here is the fact that the whole of tonight's story turns upon. The fact that makes the Mantis tribe worth a story of their own. When the infection swept through the kingdom and emptied nearly everyone, the Mantises resisted it. Not with a cure, for there was no cure. Not with a wall, for no wall could hold it. They resisted it with the one thing they had spent their entire history building, the one thing the plague could not simply reach through and switch off. They resisted it with will, with sheer unbending strength of mind, the same fierce discipline that made them warriors, the same iron pride that would not bow to a king, turned out to be the one armour in all the kingdom that the infection could not pierce. Where lesser creatures had minds soft enough for the sickness to flow into and fill, the Mantises had minds like clenched fists, and the sickness could find no room in them, no crack to seep through, no softness to pool in. They simply refused. They held their own thoughts against the tide by force of nothing but their own hard-honed, disciplined will, and the tide broke against them. A wandering scholar who passed through their lands in the kingdom's last days saw it and marvelled at it, and his quiet observation is one of the truest things anyone says about them. He noticed that the sickness which hung in the very air of that place, the fog that clouded the minds of every lesser beast around them, simply could not touch the Mantises. They kept their intelligence, they kept their honour, they remained wholly, defiantly themselves, when nearly everyone else in the whole world had already been hollowed out. And he noted too with a scholar's careful honesty that keeping themselves meant keeping all of themselves, including their lethal traditions, including the deadly unwelcoming pride that made their village so dangerous to enter. Their resistance was not softness, it was not gentleness that saved them. It was the opposite. It was hardness, the same hardness that made them kill intruders without hesitation, and that hardness was, in the end, the only thing in the kingdom strong enough to keep a mind whole against a plague that emptied minds. Their greatest danger and their great salvation were the same quality, seen from two sides. As the infection worsened and the measures meant to contain it failed one after another, The Mantises did what a proud and disciplined people does when the world outside its walls begins to rot. They tightened, they drew their borders closer and watched them harder, and they made a grim decision that they carried out without flinching. Any bug they suspected of carrying the sickness, any creature that came near their village with the taint of the plague upon it, they killed. Not out of cruelty, but out of a cold and total commitment to keeping their people clean. They could not risk it. They had seen what one infected mind could become, had seen how the sickness spread, and they would not let it find so much as a single crack in the wall they had made of themselves. So the village grew even more dangerous than before, its warriors even quicker to strike, its thresholds even less forgiving. To come to the Mantis village in those days was to come to one of the last truly uninfected places in the whole kingdom, and to be met at its gates by warriors who would kill you on the mere suspicion that you might carry the thing they had sworn would never take them. It was harsh. It was in its way magnificent. It was the discipline of a people who had decided that they would rather be feared and clean than welcoming and lost. To understand how extraordinary that was, it helps to remember just how few ever managed it at all. The infection swept through nearly everyone. Kings and scholars and warriors and common bugs alike lay down and woke as husks. And the plague did not much care how mighty or how clever its victims had been, because it did not attack the body or the intellect, but the will beneath them. And most wills, however brilliant the mind above them, simply were not built to hold. Here and there across the ruined kingdom, a rare individual resisted, held on to themselves through some private and extraordinary strength, a scholar clinging to purpose, a lone soul too stubborn or too focused to be emptied. But these were scattered exceptions, single flames guttering in a vast dark, and even they often paid a terrible price for their resistance, or held on only for a while before the tide finally took them. What sets the Mantises apart from all of these is that they resisted not as scattered individuals, but as an entire people, a whole tribe, together, holding the line as one. It is one thing for a single exceptional soul to keep its mind against the plague. It is another thing entirely for a whole society to do it, to have built over ages a culture so hard and so disciplined that its resistance was not the achievement of one hero, but the shared inheritance of every member. The tribe did not resist because a few of its number happened to be strong. It resisted because being unbreakable was woven into what it meant to belong to them at all. That is why they are remembered as the great exception, arguably the one whole faction in all the kingdom to beat the plague on its own terms. Others resisted alone. The Mantises resisted together, and that togetherness was its own kind of strength, a wall made not of one will but of many, all set in the same unyielding direction. And yet, for all their strength, the tribe did not resist the infection perfectly, not every one of them, and here we come to the great wound in their history, the one crack that did open, the one part of the wall that fell. Because not every Mantis chose to hold the line by will. One of them chose, instead, to open the door. Alongside the three sisters who ruled the tribe there was another lord, a brother, a Mantis of high rank and great strength. And where his sisters looked at the infection and saw only a plague to be resisted, he looked at it and saw something else. He saw power. He had watched, as everyone had, the way the sickness changed those it took. The way an infected host became, for all its lost mind. Undeniably stronger, swollen with a borrowed and terrible strength. And to a warrior whose entire life and whose entire people were organized around the pursuit of strength, that was a temptation that reached very deep. He came to believe, this brother, that the infection could be a path rather than a plague. That if a warrior were strong enough, disciplined enough, he might take the sickness into himself and harness it, might use its mutagenic power to become something greater than any Mantis had ever been. The perfect warrior, unstoppable, remade by the very thing that had unmade everyone else. It is a seductive idea, and you can understand how it took root in a mind built entirely around the worship of strength. Why merely resist a source of power when you might master it? Why hold the line against a thing that could make you a god of battle, if only you were strong enough to bend it to your will? And so he made his choice, the choice his sisters would never make, and he was not alone in it. A number of the tribe's youths and warriors, drawn to the same dark promise, chose to follow him, to embrace the infection willingly, to open their own minds to the orange light in the belief that they were strong enough to remain themselves inside it. They were not. That is the sorrow at the centre of it. The strength was real, but it came at exactly the price the sickness always demanded, the same price it demanded of everyone, and no amount of warrior discipline could haggle it down. The infection gave them the power they sought, and it took, in exchange, the very thing that would have let them use it well. It took their minds, slowly, as the light filled them, the clarity that made them warriors drained away, and the honour that made them mantises curdled into something blind and territorial and mad. They became stronger and emptier at once, and the strength meant less and less the more of themselves they lost, until in the end they were not perfect warriors at all, but simply infected things that happened to be shaped like mantises, driven by a dumb and endless hunger to claim ground and kill whatever came near. The dark bargain paid out precisely as it always did. They reached for power and were handed madness wearing power's face. What followed was the tribe turning upon itself, and it is one of the quietly terrible moments in the whole history of the deep. The three sisters would not tolerate the corruption their brother had brought into their people. He and his followers had become the very thing the whole tribe had sworn to keep out. The sickness itself now living inside their own village, and there could be no truce with that, no honourable duel to settle it. There was only a fight, brother against sisters, the infected against the clean, and it was a bloody one. The story does not show us every blow of that civil war, but it lets us understand that many fell, that Mantis killed Mantis in the chambers of their own home, that the proud unbroken tribe was forced to spend its own blood tearing the infection out of its own body. And in the end the sisters won, and their brother and his surviving followers were cast out, exiled from the village forever, driven from the lands their people had held since before the kingdom was born. The wall had held, but only by cutting away the part of itself that had rotted, and the cut went straight through the middle of a family. The exiles did not simply vanish. They fled, carrying their infection and their madness with them, and they made their way at last to one of the most beautiful places in all the kingdom, a strange and quiet irony that creatures so far gone should end up somewhere so lovely. They came to the Queen's Gardens, a sprawling green refuge of flowering vines and thorny hedges and gentle lantern light, once tended and treasured, now overgrown and abandoned, and they made it their own. They set up their crude tents among the flowers. They placed their marks throughout the wild gardens, claiming the territory as theirs with the blind insistence of minds that could no longer hold any thought larger than "this is mine." When a wanderer passes through those gardens long after, the traces are still there to read. The tents, the marks, the ruined beauty overrun by things that no longer remember why they fight. Only that they do. They survive there still, in the deep of the gardens, attacking anything that moves, guided by nothing any more but a basic and violent instinct to defend a ground they cannot even remember choosing. Not all of the cast-out warriors stayed in the gardens. Either some of them drifted, in their madness, to a grim arena elsewhere in the kingdom. A brutal fighting pit where the desperate and the violent and the lost went to trade blows for the entertainment of a rough crowd. A place that gathered the kingdom's castaways and set them against one another for sport. There, among the other broken and dangerous things, a few of the infected Mantis exiles found a use for the only thing they had left, their strength, fighting in the pit, because fighting was all that remained to them. It is a bleak afterlife for a warrior of so proud a tribe, to end not defending an ancient home in honourable combat, but brawling in a pit for a jeering crowd. The honour long since burned away, only the violence left, sold cheap for the amusement of strangers. It is the exact opposite of everything the tribe stood for. Honour without a home rather than a home defended with honour. And it shows, one more time, what the infection does. It does not only take the mind, it takes the meaning. It takes a warrior's strength and strips it of everything that made the strength worth having, and leaves it swinging in an empty pit. A claw still sharp, a purpose long gone. Their fallen lord became something the world remembers by a single bitter name. Stripped of his rank and his home, and in the end of his very mind, he is called now the Traitor Lord, remembered in the kingdom's grim records as the deposed lord of the Mantis tribe who embraced the infection and turned against his sisters. If you reach into the fading dreams still clinging to him, all that is left to find is a single blunt thought, repeated, the thought of a mind reduced almost to nothing, insisting only that the lands are his now, our lands now. That is nearly all that remains of a lord who once sat in council with his three sisters and dreamed of becoming the perfect warrior. A scrap of territorial instinct, a claim with no thinker left behind it, echoing in the ruin of a mind that traded everything it was for a strength it can no longer even understand. There is no perfect warrior there. There is only a large and dangerous emptiness that used to be someone, roosting in a garden of dead flowers, killing whatever comes. It is worth lingering on the seduction that led him there, because it is a very old and very human kind of trap, and the story tells it with real understanding rather than mere condemnation. The infection did, in a narrow and literal sense, deliver on its promise. An infected host truly is stronger than it was before, swollen with the plague's borrowed power, harder to bring down, more relentless in a fight. From the outside, in the early moments, it can genuinely look like a bargain worth making, especially to someone whose whole identity is built around becoming stronger. The Traitor Lord was not a fool, exactly, He saw something real. He saw that the sickness conferred power, and he reasoned, as the ambitious have always reasoned, that he could take the power and pay none of the price, that he was the exception, that his will was strong enough to ride the tiger without being eaten by it. What he could not see, what the seduction always hides until it is too late, is that the price is not a separate thing you might negotiate away. The price is built into the gift. The strength and the emptiness are the same substance. You cannot take the one without the other, because they are not two things at all, only two faces of the single thing the infection is. That is the quiet warning folded into the traitor's whole story, and it stands in perfect contrast to his sisters. He sought strength by surrender, by opening himself to a power greater than himself, and trusting he could keep his footing inside it. And he lost everything, including the strength itself, which meant nothing once there was no mind left to wield it. His sisters sought strength by refusal, by closing themselves against that same power and holding their own ground by will alone, and they kept everything, their minds, their honour, their home, and the true strength that lives in an unbroken self. Two roads to power, opening and closing, surrender and refusal, and the story lets us see with terrible clarity which one leads where. The one who reached for more lost even what he had. The ones who refused to reach kept all of it. It is an old lesson, told in the deep in orange light and mantis blood, that the strength worth having is the strength you already are, not the strength you might become by giving yourself away to something that promises to make you more and leaves you nothing instead. The exiles reached higher too in their madness, and did real and lasting harm to the good things of the world before they were done. Deep in the Queen's gardens lived one of the gentlest and most important beings in the whole kingdom, the Pale Root, the ancient wise consort of the king, a being of quiet grace who had withdrawn into the green to be alone with her sorrows. The infected mantises tried to drive her out. They pushed toward her sanctuary, meaning to take even that last refuge for their own, and they very nearly reached her. What stopped them was a single knight, one of the greatest warriors ever to serve the Pale King, a fierce and famously capable protector who had been given the task of standing guard over the Pale Root in her retreat. She met the infected horde alone, and she held them, and she fought them off again and again to keep the gentle Root safe behind her. But there were so many of them, and they did not tire, and they did not fear, and they did not stop. And in the end, for all her fierceness, for all her skill, the lone knight was overwhelmed. The infected mantises came in numbers past what any single warrior could turn back, and they brought her down at last. When a wanderer finally reaches that quiet corner of the gardens, the truth of it is written plainly and terribly in the stillness. There lies the fallen knight, and heaped around her, the bodies of the many infected mantises she took with her before they finally took her. She died as she had lived, standing between something precious and the things that wanted to destroy it, and she took a fearful toll doing it. And the cruelest detail of all, the one that lingers, is that the being she died protecting never learned of it. The Pale Root sits in her sanctuary still, safe, unaware, and does not know that her guardian is dead just beyond the vines, believing perhaps that the fierce knight is simply keeping watch somewhere nearby, as she always did. A death unmourned by the one it saved, because that one never even knew there had been a death. The infected mantises took that too, in their blind hunger. They took a great night, and they took her from the memory of the one person who would have grieved her most. There is a smaller, softer grief folded into the story of the exiles too, one that has nothing to do with battle, and it is the kind of quiet tragedy that stays with you longer than any fight. The fallen lord, before his fall, had a daughter, and that daughter, at some point, loved someone, an outsider, a wanderer from beyond the tribe, one of the Pale King's own great knights, a gentle grey-cloaked warrior who had come from a far-off land. The two of them, the Mantis Lord's daughter and the outsider knight, loved each other in a world that had no room for it, for the Lord would never have blessed such a bond. And then his rebellion came and tore the whole world apart, and there could be no future for them at all. The daughter died. The story does not tell us exactly how, only that she died, and that her grave lies in a hidden cave in the Queen's gardens, above the old station, smothered in the same vines that have swallowed everything else in that abandoned green. And her lover never stopped mourning her. The grey knight, having lost the mantis she loved, laid down her old life and became something else, a mourner, retreating into a quiet house to grieve for the rest of her days, carrying a sorrow that time could not touch. When a wanderer comes to her, long after, she asks a single gentle thing, that a delicate flower be carried through the whole dangerous kingdom and laid upon the grave of the one she lost. It is a small quest and an enormous one, to carry something fragile and beautiful through a world full of things that would crush it, all the way to a hidden grave in an overgrown garden, so that a grieving knight can finally say goodbye. And when it is done, when the flower is laid at last on the grave of the traitor's child, the mourner is finally able to fade, her long grief complete, released at last to follow the one she loved. It is one of the tenderest threads in the whole kingdom, and it grows, quietly, out of the tribe's great wound, out of the infection and the rebellion and the exile. The fall of the Mantis Lord did not only cost warriors and knights, it cost a daughter her life and a lover her peace, and left a flower waiting to be carried to a grave. Now hold all of that in your mind for a moment, gently, because it matters enormously for the question we are here to sit with tonight. Everything I have just told you is the story of the part of the tribe that fell. The traitor lord, the exiles, the madness in the gardens, the fallen knight, the daughter's grave. All of it is what happened when infected mantises were loosed upon the world. And it is only a fragment of the tribe. It was a splinter, a minority, a single lord and his followers, cast out and contained, driven off to rot in a distant garden while the true tribe, the sisters and the warriors who held to their discipline, remained clean and whole and standing at their post. That containment is the reason the kingdom did not suffer worse than it did. The infected mantises were terrible, but they were few, and they were exiled far from anything that mattered most, and the wall at Deepness stayed manned by mantises who still had their minds. But it lets us see with perfect clarity exactly what an infected mantis becomes. We do not have to guess. We do not have to invent anything. The world has already shown us, in the traitor lord and his followers, precisely what the infection does to these particular warriors when they let it in. It makes them stronger, yes, and it makes them mad. It hollows out the honour and leaves only the hunger. It turns the most disciplined fighters in the kingdom into blind territorial things that kill without thought and claim without reason. It takes the very best of what a mantis is, the will, the honour, the earned and tested strength, and it burns all of that away and leaves only the killing behind. And so, when we ask the question that gives tonight its shape, when we wonder what would have happened if the Mantis tribe had been infected, we are not asking something the world cannot answer. We are asking what would have happened if the whole tribe had become what the traitor faction became, if the wall itself had turned, if the sisters had fallen where their brother fell, and the entire proud people had gone over to the orange light at once. Let us imagine it, gently, the way you might imagine a storm from the safety of a warm, dark room, knowing it is not real, knowing you are safe, letting the thought move through you without any weight. What would have become of the deep, and of the kingdom, and of the whole slow tragedy, if the Mantis tribe had not resisted the infection at all? It is only a possibility, only a shadow the story lets us trace along its edges, never something that happened. But the world has given us enough true pieces that we can follow the shape of it honestly, and there is a strange, sad comfort in walking through a disaster that never came, in seeing how much was quietly saved by a thing most of the kingdom never even thanked them for. So let us follow that shadow down, slowly, and see where an infected tribe would have led. The first thing to fall, and the most immediately catastrophic, would have been the gate. Remember what the tribe was doing, faithfully, through all the long years of the kingdom's decline. They were holding the border with deepness. They were the wall between the ravenous dark and everything else, the one thing keeping the swift and hungry predators of that tangled realm from pouring up into the rest of the world. That duty was carried out by mantises who still had their minds, who still remembered the truce, who still stood their posts with intention and discipline and honour. An infected mantis remembers none of those things. An infected mantis holds no posts, keeps no truces, guards no borders. It only claims ground and kills what comes. And so, if the whole tribe had fallen, the gate would have gone unguarded, not thrown open exactly, but simply abandoned, left in the keeping of creatures who no longer understood that they were keeping anything at all. Picture, then, the dark of deepness, and imagine that the wall in front of it has quietly ceased to be a wall. The creatures of that realm are always pressing, always testing the border, always hungry for the softer lands beyond. For age after age they found, at that border, a village of the deadliest warriors in the kingdom, minds sharp and claws sharper, ready to drive them back the instant they pushed too far. And then, in this shadow we are imagining, they would find instead a village of infected things, strong but blind, dangerous but purposeless, no longer holding any line, no longer defending any border, simply milling in the dark, claiming ground they did not understand they held. The predators of deepness are patient and clever in their own cruel way. It would not take them long to sense that the old vigilance was gone, that the wall had become just another patch of infected ground, and to begin to move through it, up and out, into a kingdom that had counted on that border holding for longer than anyone still living could remember, and the kingdom in those days was in no condition to stop them. This is the quiet horror of the possibility, that the tribe's fall would have come at the worst imaginable moment, when everything else was already collapsing. The great city was already emptying into husks. The king's order was already failing. The knights were already scattered or fallen. There was no army left to rush to a broken border, no fresh defence to raise where the old one had crumbled, because everything that might have answered such a crisis was already busy dying of the same plague. The Mantises were not just a wall. They were, by the end, one of the last walls still standing anywhere, one of the last places where anything was still being deliberately, competently defended. To lose them would not have been to lose one defence among many. It would have been to lose one of the very last, at precisely the moment the kingdom could least afford it, and to open a second front of ruin, the ravenous dark of deepness, at the same time as the plague itself. The kingdom might have been eaten from within by the infection, and from below by the beasts at once, two catastrophes where there had been, thanks to the tribe, only one. There is a deeper loss folded inside that one though, quieter and harder to name, and it may be the truest cost of all. The Mantis tribe was not only a wall of claws, it was a wall of meaning. In a kingdom where nearly everyone had fallen, where the infection had proven itself able to empty almost any mind, the Mantises stood as living proof that the plague could be resisted at all. They were the evidence that a mind strong enough could hold, that the orange light was not absolutely invincible, that there existed, somewhere in the world, a will the sickness could not break. That proof mattered. It mattered to anyone who still had hope, anyone who still believed the kingdom might not be wholly lost, anyone who looked at the endless husks and needed to believe that being a husk was not the only possible end. And if the tribe had fallen, that proof would have fallen with it. The last clear example that resistance was even possible would have been erased, and the infection could have claimed with terrible finality that nothing anywhere could stand against it. The Mantises kept that from being true. Their unbroken minds were an argument, held up against the dark, that the dark did not have to win. To lose them would have been to lose the argument. Think, too, of what it would have meant for the lone wanderer who comes, long after, down into the deep to try to set things right. When that small, quiet traveller reaches the Mantis village as things truly happened, something remarkable and almost tender occurs. The traveller is tested, fiercely, met with the full deadly welcome of a tribe that suspects every stranger of carrying the plague. And when the traveller proves worthy, when the three sisters are bested in fair and open combat, the tribe does the thing that makes them who they are. They stop. They bow. They recognise in that moment two things at once, that the stranger is strong, and that the stranger is clean, uninfected, worthy of the old honour. And they grant free passage, and they give a mark of their respect to carry onward, and they let the traveller through toward the deeper places the journey must reach. That moment of recognition, that bow, is one of the few moments of pure earned grace in the whole long sorrowful descent. It is a meeting of honour between two beings who owe each other nothing and choose respect anyway. If the tribe had fallen, none of that could have happened. There would have been no honourable duel, because infected things do not duel, they only swarm. There would have been no recognition of worth, because the minds that could recognise worth would have been gone. There would have been no bow, no mark of respect, no granting of passage, only another horde of mindless infected warriors to be cut through the way one cuts through husks everywhere else in the ruined kingdom, without ceremony, without meeting, without any spark of honour passing between them. The traveller would have lost not a battle but a moment, one of the rare moments in the whole journey when the world offered something other than sorrow, when a proud people looked at a small stranger and chose to say, "You are worthy, pass freely, we respect you." That moment exists only because the tribe held. In the shadow where they fell, it simply never happens, and the descent is one grace poorer, one bow colder, one more stretch of mindless killing where there might have been a meeting of honour instead. Picture the village itself in that shadow, and let the picture be as honest as the true one was. The carved chambers would still be there, the ledges and the narrow passages and the 3 thrones at the heart of it. But the mist would drift now over infected things instead of watchful warriors. The sisters upon their thrones would sit with orange light pooling in their eyes, no longer watching, no longer waiting to be challenged, no longer capable of the calm composure that made them who they were, only twitching with the same blind hunger that filled every husk in the ruined kingdom. The old words carved in the stone would still promise that the truce remained, and the vigil held, and the beasts were kept at bay, but there would be no one left in that village able to read them, no one left who remembered making the promise, the proud declarations of a people reduced to lies carved over the heads of things that could no longer keep a single word. There are few images sadder in all the imagining than that. A village full of promises no one inside it can any longer honour. The stone still boasting of a vigil, while the vigil itself lies emptied on its own thrones. To picture it truly, we should remember what the infection does to a body as well as a mind, because the transformation is visible, written on the shell for anyone to see. It begins in the eyes. The clear, sharp eyes of a mantis, so quick to read an opponent's next move, would fill with a dull orange glow, the light of the plague shining out from behind them where a mind used to be. Then the growths would come, soft swellings of infected matter rising from the shell, orange and wet and wrong, the plague pushing out through the body it had claimed. The proud clean lines of a mantis warrior would be marred and bloated by it, the elegant lethal shape turned into something lumpen and dripping and feverish, and worst of all would be the way they moved, the honed precision of a lifetime's training reduced to a jerking, lurching, mindless aggression, the same graceless lunging that every husk in the kingdom shared, all that discipline drowned in the same dumb orange tide. A village of that, where there had been a village of the deadliest grace in the deep, is the picture the shadow asks us to hold, and it is a mercy, a real and quiet mercy, that we only have to imagine it, that the true village kept its clear eyes and its clean shells and its terrible precise grace to the very end. And the wanderer's whole long descent, the journey that must eventually reach the deepest places to confront the infection at its very source, would have been made darker and more dangerous by the loss. The path through the deep is hard enough as it is, but the tribe, once they bow, become almost a still point in the chaos, a place of earned safety, a village where the traveller can pass freely and rest and gather strength before pressing on into the dark below. Strip that away, and one of the few safe harbours in the entire descent becomes instead one of its deadliest gauntlets. A whole tribe of infected warriors barring the way where there had been passage granted in honour. The journey to end the plague, would have had to pass through a place wholly given over to the plague. A bitter irony. The road to the cure running straight through one of the worst concentrations of the disease. What was, in truth, a place of rest and respect on the long, hard road would have become, in the shadow, one more reason the road might never be finished at all. There is one more true story the world gives us before we go deeper into the shadow, and it is perhaps the most important of all for understanding tonight's question, because it is the story of someone who believed the Mantis tribe was infected when it was not. His name was Elder Hu, and he was a travelling sage, a wise and well-meaning wanderer who had taken it upon himself to move through the borderlands of the kingdom and purify them of the infection wherever he found it. Think of that for a moment. In a world falling to a plague of the mind, here was someone who set out, deliberately, to be part of the answer, to seek out the sickness and cleanse it, to do good in a dying land. He was, by every sign we have, a healer at heart, a bug who looked at the spreading ruin and decided to fight it rather than flee it. And his story is one of the saddest in the whole kingdom, because of the particular and terrible way his good intentions turned against him. Elder Hu, you see, had a flaw he could not perceive. Somewhere along his travels, in his own journey through a plagued and dreaming land, his own mind had been touched by the very thing he sought to cleanse. The infection had reached him too, quietly, and it had begun to cloud his own thoughts, to distort his own seeing, in exactly the way it distorted everyone it touched. But because it was his own mind, he could not see it. That is the cruelty of a sickness of the mind, that the very instrument you would use to detect it is the thing being corrupted. And so Elder Hu wandered on, believing himself clear-eyed and clean, believing himself a healer moving through a sick world, when in truth he carried the sickness inside his own clouded head, seeing the world through the orange fog without ever knowing the fog was there. And in that state, carrying the infection in his own mind while believing himself its enemy, he came at last to the Mantis village. He came to the one place in all the borderlands that had truly resisted the plague, the one tribe that had held itself clean by sheer force of will, the great exception, the proof that resistance was possible. And his infected mind, looking at the cleanest people in the kingdom, saw them as afflicted. The distortion in his own thoughts made him perceive the uninfected mantises as the very thing he had come to purge. He looked at warriors who had beaten the plague and saw plague. He looked at the honour and discipline that had saved them and saw only corruption to be cleansed. And so, meaning to do good, meaning to heal, meaning to purify a village that needed no purifying, he attacked them. The mantises did what the mantises always do. They defended their home. They met the stranger who had come at them with violence the way they met any threat, with lethal and total commitment, and they killed him. And there is no villain in that moment, which is what makes it so hard and so sad. The mantises were not wrong to defend themselves against a bug attacking them. They could not have known his intentions were noble, and noble or not, he was trying to harm them. Elder Hu was not evil, he was a healer whose own sickness had turned his healing into harm, who died believing to the very end that he was doing the right thing, that he was cleansing an infected village, when in fact he was an infected bug being stopped by a clean one. Two forces of good, a would-be healer and an unbroken tribe, brought into deadly conflict by nothing but the infection's genius for turning minds against the truth. He died at the claws of the very people whose survival should have given him hope, killed while trying to destroy the one thing in the borderlands worth protecting. The kingdom remembered him in its quiet way. A memorial was raised in his name above the gates of the great city, and upon it were laid the things he had carried in life, his simple tunic and a necklace of beads, small humble relics of a sage who had wandered and meant well and died confused. And if a traveller comes to that memorial, carrying the power to step into dreams, the lingering spirit of Elder Hu can still be found there, still caught in the delusion that killed him, still convinced that the mantises were infected, still warning any who will listen against a plague that was only ever in his own head. He fights the traveller out of that same deluded conviction. But when he is finally bested, something merciful happens in the dream. The delusion breaks. In his last dreaming moment, Elder Hu sees clearly at last. He understands, finally, that his own mind had been the sick one all along, that his madness drove him to his death, that the tribe he thought he was purifying had been clean the whole time, and he had been the one carrying the plague. He realizes his own death and the terrible mistake that caused it, and only then, understanding at last, does he let go, dissolving into 100 points of gentle light to be gathered up and carried on. He got his clarity in the end. It came too late to save him, but it came. He died in confusion and woke, in the dream, into truth. Elder Hu matters so much to tonight's question, because he is the perfect inversion of it, the mirror image of the thing we are imagining. We are asking what would happen if the Mantis tribe truly were infected. Elder Hu is the story of what happens when someone only believes they are. He shows us how completely the infection works by distorting perception, how it can make the clean look corrupt and the healer into the harmer, how the greatest danger of a plague of the mind is that it makes you unable to trust your own seeing. And he shows us by contrast just how genuinely clean the mantises were. It took an infected mind to look at them and see sickness. To any clear eye, they were exactly what they appeared to be, the last unbroken people in a broken land. The tragedy of Elder Hu is a kind of proof of the tribe's purity, written in the saddest possible ink. The only one who ever mistook them for infected was himself infected. Everyone whose mind was clear could see the truth. They had not fallen. They alone had held. So let us return to the shadow, and let us imagine it more fully now, with everything the world has taught us held gently in mind. Imagine that the fall had not been contained to a single lord and a handful of followers. Imagine that the sickness had found its way into the sisters themselves, into the warriors who held the village, into the youths still earning their place, into all of them at once. The small exiled faction that rotted in the Queen's gardens was frightening enough. A few dozen mad infected mantises tearing at a single garden and bringing down one great knight. Multiply that by the whole tribe. Picture not a splinter, but the entire people, every disciplined warrior of the deadliest tribe in the kingdom, turned all together into infected things, and picture them not scattered in a distant garden, but massed exactly where they had always been, at the great gate, at the border, at the one choke point that mattered most in the whole geography of the deep. It would have been among the most dangerous concentrations of infected power anywhere in the kingdom. Remember what the infection does to a mantis. It does not weaken them. It makes them stronger, even as it empties them, so that an infected mantis is a more physically fearsome thing than a clean one. All that honed lethal skill still written into the body even after the mind that guided it is gone. A whole tribe of them, swollen with the plague's borrowed strength and stripped of every restraint that honour once placed on that strength, would have been a horror with few equals in the entire fallen world. No jewels, no tests, no bows, no passage granted to the worthy, because nothing worthy could survive the crossing, and nothing left in those warriors could recognize worth if it did. Just a seething mass of the deadliest bodies in the kingdom, holding the most important gate in the kingdom, with no minds left inside them at all. The place that had been the last honourable stronghold in the deep would have become instead the single worst place a wanderer could possibly go. The world even leaves us a small quiet clue about the difference between the clean tribe and the fallen one, written in their very shapes. And it is the kind of detail that rewards a slow and careful eye. The three sisters who ruled and resisted, and the warriors who held with them, have a particular delicate form, resembling a certain slender winged insect more than the fierce hunting creature the tribe is named for. But the fallen brother, the traitor lord, the one who embraced the infection, is drawn differently. He resembles the true predatory mantis, larger, heavier, built entirely for the kill. It is a subtle thing, and the story never points to it directly, but it can be read as a gentle visual echo of what happened to him, as though embracing the infection had stripped away something finer and left only the raw hunting shape beneath, the pure predator with nothing gentle left in its lines. One quiet reading is that the world is showing us, in the very silhouette of the traitor, what the tribe would have become entire if it had fallen. Not the slender, resisting shape of the sisters, but the heavy predatory shape of the brother, multiplied across a whole people. A tribe reduced to its most brutal outline with all the finer things burned away. And yet even in that darkest imagining, the honour of the tribe casts a long light, because the world gives us one more figure who helps us feel exactly what would have been lost. There was a wandering warrior, an outsider from far away, who came down into the deep in those last days seeking nothing more than a worthy fight. She had heard, from a long-necked traveller she met along the way, of a fierce tribe roosting in the glades, warrior sorts, deadly and proud, and rather than fear them she was drawn to them, itching, as she put it, for some serious combat. She was that rare kind of soul who sought out the strong not to conquer them, but simply to test herself against them, to meet honour with honour, to find out what she was made of against the best the world could offer. She went looking for the traitorous tribe in the gardens, meaning to challenge them, and in the end she stood beside the small quiet traveller against the traitor lord himself, and gave everything she had in that fight, and in one telling laid down her own life so that the fallen lord could be brought down at last. She is a small figure in the vast story, easy to miss, but she matters here because of what she was seeking. She was seeking exactly the thing the Mantis tribe, at its best, embodied: the honest test. The worthy fight. The meeting of strength with strength in a spirit of respect rather than hatred. And the tragedy is that she came too late, that the tribe she went looking for in those glades was not the clean and honourable tribe of the village, but the fallen mad remnant in the gardens, warriors who could no longer offer a true test, because there was no mind left in them to honour one. She sought the honour of the Mantises and found only their infected shadow, and gave her life against it. If the whole tribe had fallen, that is all any seeker of honour would ever have found. Everywhere, forever, the clean tribe was the last place in the deep where a soul like hers could have found the thing she was looking for. In the shadow where they fell, that thing simply ceases to exist in the world at all, and every warrior who came seeking a worthy fight would have found, instead, only another swarm. That perhaps is the heart of what the tribe's resistance preserved, more than the gate, more even than the wall against deepness. They preserved honour itself, in a world where nearly everything else had lost its mind. They kept alive, in one small proud village in the green deep, the idea that strength could be tested rather than merely inflicted, that a stranger could be met with respect rather than mindless hunger, that there was a right way and a wrong way to fight and to die. The infection did not only kill bodies and empty minds, it killed meaning. It reduced everything it touched to blind appetite, to the dumb insistence of the traitor lord's last fading thought, our lands now, a claim with no honour and no thinker behind it. And against all of that, the Mantises held not only their lives but their code, not only their minds but the whole idea that a mind was worth keeping. They were the last place in the deep where a fight still meant something. That is a strange and beautiful thing to have been the last of, and it is exactly the thing that would have vanished if they had fallen. It is worth sitting quietly for a while with the strange nature of how the Mantises survived, because it tells us something about the whole shape of the plague and the whole shape of the kingdom's doomed struggle against it. The infection was a sickness of the mind that filled empty spaces, that flowed into any softness it could find, and pooled there and swelled until it had crowded out whoever had lived in that mind before. And there were, in the end, only two ways anyone ever found to keep it out. Two opposite ways, at the very opposite ends of what a mind could be. The Mantises took one of them. They kept a mind so full, so hard, so completely and fiercely their own, that there was simply no room in it for anything else to enter. Their will filled every corner of themselves, and the plague, arriving, found no vacancy, no soft place to settle, no crack to seep through. They resisted by being utterly, unbreakably present in their own heads, too much themselves for anything else to fit. And the kingdom's ruler, facing the same plague, reached for the exact opposite solution, and it is one of the quiet ironies of the whole story that both approaches were aiming at the same wall from opposite sides. Where the Mantises kept a mind too full to infect, the Pale King tried to make a mind too empty to infect. He sought to craft a vessel with no mind at all, no will, no self, nothing for the infection to corrupt, because there would be nothing there in the first place. A perfect hollow emptiness that the plague could pour into and find nothing to hold. A mind so absent that it could not be broken. A container built specifically to have no one home. Two strategies against one sickness, each betting everything on a different extreme. Fill the mind completely, or empty it completely. Be so present that nothing else can enter, or be so absent that there is nothing to enter at all. It is a haunting pairing, and the Mantises stand on the far bright end of it, the living proof that the first path, the path of overwhelming will, could actually work, where the king's careful emptiness, in the end, did not. There is a lesson folded into that contrast, gentle and a little sad, and it can be read as a quiet interpretation the story offers without ever stating it plainly. The thing that saved the Mantises was not power in the ordinary sense. It was not their claws or their speed or their skill in battle, though they had all of those in abundance. Plenty of powerful creatures fell to the plague. What saved them was something harder to name and harder to build. A kind of total ownership of themselves, an identity so deeply held that it could not be dislodged. They knew exactly who they were. They had known for longer than the kingdom had existed, and that unshakable knowledge of themselves turned out to be the one armour the infection could not pierce, worth more in the end than any strength of body. It is a strange comfort to carry, the idea that what keeps a mind whole against the things that would empty it is not power but selfhood, not force but a clear and unwavering sense of who one is. The Mantises survived because they could not be talked out of themselves, not even by a god. But that same quality, the hardness that saved them, was also the source of all their sorrow, and the story is honest about that too. The will that kept them clean was the same will that made them kill without mercy. The discipline that armoured their minds was the same discipline that greeted strangers with death and killed a well-meaning sage for the crime of being confused. Their salvation and their cruelty grew from a single root, and you cannot have one without the other. A softer tribe, a gentler and more welcoming people, might have been easier to love, but a softer tribe would have fallen, because softness was exactly the vacancy the plague required. The Mantises survived precisely because they had no softness to offer, and that is a hard and lonely way to survive. They kept their minds by keeping their walls high, and the walls kept out the plague, but the walls kept out everything else too. Kindness and welcome and the chance to be understood. They ended the story as the last clean people in the deep, and also as one of the loneliest, feared and avoided and misjudged. Their great achievement invisible to almost everyone, their vigil unthanked, their honour mistaken by the one sage who came near enough to see it for corruption, and they paid for it in blood that was their own. This is the cost we should not look away from, because it is the truest measure of what their resistance demanded. To stay clean, they had to cut the infection out of their own body, and the infection had gotten into their own family, into a brother who sat beside the sisters in council. Keeping the tribe whole meant tearing the tribe apart. The sisters did not get to resist the plague from a safe distance. They had to turn their claws on their own brother and his followers, to fight and kill their own people, to spend the blood of their family to keep the rest of the family clean. Every measure of their unbroken purity was bought with a measure of their own grief. They won, and the winning cost them a brother, cost them the warriors who followed him, cost them whatever their family had been before the sickness came between them. The Mantises are often remembered simply as the proud tribe that resisted, as if resistance were a clean and glorious thing. It was not clean. It was a civil war in miniature, a family cutting off its own infected limb to survive, and the sisters carried that loss quietly on their 3 thrones for the rest of the story, unbroken and unthanked, and in the deepest sense bereaved. So when we imagine the shadow, when we imagine the whole tribe falling, we should understand that we are imagining the failure of the single hardest and most costly act of resistance in the entire kingdom. The Mantises did not survive by luck or by circumstance. They survived by choosing over and over to be harder than the plague, and by paying for that hardness in isolation and in blood and in the loss of their own kin. If they had failed, it would not have been because they were weak. It would have been because even the strongest will in the world can be too small against a god of light reaching through every dream. And the fact that they did not fail, that their will did prove large enough, is quietly one of the most hopeful things in a story with very little hope left in it. In a kingdom of the fallen, one proud tribe stood up and stayed standing, not because they were spared, but because they refused. That refusal is the whole reason the shadow we have been imagining stayed only a shadow. The ripples of the tribe's fall, in the shadow we are imagining, would have reached far beyond their own gate and their own borderland, out into corners of the kingdom that never even knew the Mantises existed. Consider again the quiet green refuge of the Queen's gardens, and the gentle pale root who sheltered there, and the great knight who died protecting her. In the world as it truly happened, that assault came from only the exiled faction. The traitor lord and his followers, a limited number of the fallen, and even so they were enough to overwhelm one of the finest knights the kingdom ever produced. Now imagine the assault coming not from a splinter but from the whole tribe, from the full strength of the deadliest warriors in the deep, all of them turned and maddened and hungry. The gentle root's single guardian held back the smaller horde at the cost of her life. Against the whole infected tribe, there would have been no holding at all. The refuge would have fallen, and the pale root with it, and one of the last sources of quiet wisdom in the dying kingdom, would have been lost along with everything else. And the small tokens of grace that the tribe left scattered through the world would never have existed either. When the lone traveller bests the three sisters and earns their respect, the tribe grants a mark of their honour to carry onward, a token that a wanderer wears with a kind of quiet pride, precisely because it cannot be bought or stolen or found lying in a corner, only earned, only given by a proud people to someone they have judged worthy. That mark is a small thing and an enormous one, a piece of the tribe's respect made portable, a reminder carried through the rest of the long journey that somewhere in the deep a fierce and honourable people looked at a small stranger and chose to bow. In the shadow where the tribe fell, that token never comes into being. There is no one left to judge worth, no one left to bestow honour, nothing to carry onward but the memory of another swarm cut down. The traveller would walk the rest of the descent, without that small proof that the world still contained honour, that a proud people had once looked at them and approved. There is a place, though, beyond the fall of the kingdom and beyond the reach of the infection entirely, where the Mantises live on exactly as they were, and it offers a strange kind of comfort to end the darker imaginings on. In a dreaming realm apart from the waking world, a realm where the mightiest beings of the kingdom are gathered and remembered and faced again in endless ritual combat. The three sisters take their place among the greatest warriors the world ever held. A seeker of gods, drawn to the echoes of Hellenist's fallen champions, calls them up out of memory and sets them among the divine, and there they fight on, unbroken, undimmed, exactly as fierce and exactly as honourable as they were in life. In that realm they can be faced as the three lords, and in its hardest depths they appear together, all three sisters at once, no longer taking turns but standing as one, a trial named for the sisters of battle that they are. It is a fitting immortality for them, to be remembered not as victims of a plague, but as warriors worthy of the company of gods, called up again and again to test the worthy, still bowing, still honouring strength, still themselves in every line. Even the fallen brother has his echo in that dreaming realm, and the detail the world tucks into it is quietly heartbreaking. When the traitor lord is faced there, in the arena raised for him among the remembered mighty, something waits in the background of that dreaming space, easy to miss, placed there with deliberate and painful care. It is the grave of his daughter. Even in the god realm, even reduced to a remembered echo of a fight, the traitor is given no peace from the cost of his choice. The daughter he lost, the child whose grave lies smothered in vines in the gardens he maddened, follows him even into the dream, a silent marker at the edge of his arena, reminding anyone who looks closely that this was not always a mindless monster, that this thing was once someone's father, that a real and terrible loss sits behind the blind fury. The world will not let us hate him cleanly. It keeps setting that grave at the edge of the frame, quietly insisting that the story of the infected Mantis is, underneath everything, a story of things loved and things lost. That, in the end, is what the whole question keeps returning to, under all the strategy and all the imagining of gates and hordes and fallen refuges. The story of the Mantis tribe and the infection is a story about what is lost and what is kept. The tribe kept their minds, and it cost them their brother. The traitor kept his strength, and it cost him his mind, his home, his daughter, everything. Elder Hu kept his good intentions and lost his life to them because he could not keep his clarity. The great knight kept her post and lost her life holding it, unmourned by the one she saved. Everywhere in this story someone is holding on to something and paying for it with something else, and the Mantises hold on to the hardest thing of all, themselves, and pay the loneliest price for it. And the shadow we have been tracing all night, the fall that never came, is simply the story of what would have been lost if they had not been strong enough to keep the one thing they kept. If they had lost themselves the way almost everyone else did, then everything downstream of their survival would have been lost too. The gate, the wall, the refuge, the honour, the proof that resistance was possible, the small bow to a worthy stranger, all of it gone into the same orange light that took the rest of the world. Before we do, though, let us sit for a moment with the hope the tribe's survival carries, because in a story with so little hope left in it, this is a real and quiet source of it. The whole long descent through the fallen kingdom is, for the most part, a walk through the aftermath of a defeat, a journey through the ruins of a world that lost. Nearly every great figure the traveller meets is dead, or dreaming, or emptied, or broken by grief. And in the middle of all that loss, the Mantis tribe stands as living proof that the ending was not inevitable, that the plague was not truly unbeatable, that somewhere in the kingdom a people met the exact same darkness everyone else met, and simply did not fall to it. That matters more than it might seem. It means the tragedy of the kingdom was not fate but failure, not something that had to happen, but something that happened because most wills were not strong enough, and that a strong enough will could have changed everything. The mantises are the evidence that the darkness could be refused. And that evidence quietly changes the whole meaning of the traveller's journey, because it suggests that the plague at the heart of the kingdom is not an unstoppable force of nature, but a thing that can in fact be resisted and perhaps ended. Every step the traveller takes toward confronting the infection at its source is a step made a little more hopeful by the existence, off in the green deep, of one proud tribe who already proved the thing could be beaten. They did not end the plague, but they proved it was not invincible, and in a dying world, that proof is a kind of light. Let us come back up, now, out of the shadow, into the world as it truly is, and let the darker imaginings settle behind us like silt drifting back down through still water. The tribe did not fall. That is the quiet fact to rest on. Whatever might have been, the mantises held, and because they held, the shadow stayed only a shadow, a thing we can imagine from the safety of a world where it never happened. And there is a particular kind of peace in that, the peace of appreciating a disaster that was quietly prevented by someone who never asked for thanks. So much of what keeps a world standing is invisible in exactly this way, a vigil kept in a far corner by people no one thinks about, a wall held by hands no one sees, a catastrophe averted so completely that almost no one ever knows it was near. The mantises were that kind of guardian. Their greatest gift to the kingdom was a disaster that never arrived, and there is no monument to a disaster that never arrives, no song for the beasts of deepness that never poured through, because the wall held. There is only the quiet and the standing wall, and a proud people who kept their post because keeping it was who they were. There is a deep irony in it too, gentle and a little sad, that the tribe most opposed to the kingdom became, in the end, one of its most faithful protectors. They never wanted to be part of Hallownest. They resented its founding, kept their independence at the cost of a hard bargain, and guarded its border not out of love, but out of the sheer stubborn honour of a people who keep their word. And yet, when the kingdom fell, when the great and the powerful and the beloved were all emptied one by one, it was these proud outsiders, these reluctant guardians who had never bowed to the king, who alone kept faith with the old arrangement to the very end. The kingdom's truest servants, the ones who died for it and dreamed for it and sacrificed everything for it, were unmade by the plague. And the ones who had only ever tolerated the kingdom, who guarded it grudgingly for their own reasons, held their post long after there was any kingdom left to thank them. There is something quietly moving in that, the outsiders proving more constant than the faithful, the reluctant wall standing when the loving hearts had all gone still. The mantises owed Hallownest nothing, and gave it in the end the one thing it needed most, a border that held. They kept a promise to a kingdom that was no longer there to hold them to it, simply because keeping promises was who they were. Picture the village as a wanderer finds it in the kingdom's last days, and let the picture be a calm one, because for all its danger there is a stern beauty to that place. The green mist drifts through the carved chambers. The three thrones sit at the heart of it, and upon them the three sisters, still and watchful, unbroken after everything. The warriors move through the ledges and passages with their lithe deadly grace, guarding a home they have held since before the kingdom that fell around them was even born. And carved into the stone, the old words endure, the grim welcome and the quiet promise, the truce that remains, and the vigil that holds, and the beasts that are kept at bay. It is not a gentle place. It was never meant to be. But it is a place that kept its word, that stayed itself, that held its line to the very end while everything softer than it dissolved into orange light. There is dignity in that stone, and in those thrones, and in the patient deadly warriors who never once considered abandoning a post the whole world had forgotten to thank them for. And then picture the moment that redeems all that hardness, the bow. A small quiet stranger comes down into the village, is tested with everything the tribe has, and proves worthy, besting the three sisters in fair and open combat. And the tribe, who owe this stranger nothing, who could simply resent the defeat, do the thing that makes them who they are. They lower their claws. They bow. The three sisters, and then the whole tribe, offer their respect to a small worthy stranger, and grant free passage, and let the traveller through toward the deeper dark. In a kingdom drowning in a plague that turns everyone into blind appetite, here is a moment of pure, clear honour. A proud people choosing, freely, to recognise and respect the worth of another. That bow is only possible because their minds are whole. It is the visible proof of everything they saved by holding on to themselves. A husk cannot bow. A husk cannot recognise worth, cannot choose respect, cannot honour a worthy foe. Only a mind that has kept itself can do that, and the Mantises kept themselves precisely so that such things, honour and recognition and respect, could still exist somewhere in the deep. The bow is small. It is also everything. It is the whole difference between the tribe that held and the shadow that fell. There is a final quiet proof of their wholeness, one that can be found only by reaching into the country of dreams. Everywhere else in the ruined kingdom, the sleeping minds of the fallen are drowned in orange light, their dreams no longer their own, but flooded with the will of the plague, echoing only the sickness that has claimed them. But the dreams of the Mantises are still their own. Reach gently into a Mantis mind, even in the last dark days, and what waits there is not the plague, but the warrior, still whole, still present, still thinking its own hard, clear thoughts. Their inner world, the deepest and most private part of them, the part that dreams, was never taken. That is perhaps the truest measure of what it means to have resisted. It is one thing to keep your body clean and your waking thoughts your own. It is another to have kept even your dreams, even your sleep, even the softest and most vulnerable chamber of the self, unbreached by a plague that reached everyone else precisely through their dreaming. The Mantises held the line not only at their gate, but at the innermost threshold of themselves, and they held it in their sleep as surely as in their waking, dreaming their own dreams to the very end, while the rest of the kingdom dreamed the dreams of a god who had emptied them. Beyond their gate, in the dark they guarded, lay a realm that helps us understand just how much their vigil was worth. Deepness was no ordinary wilderness. It was ancient and vast and ruled, in its tangled heart, by a fierce and powerful queen of the dark, for being old enough and strong enough to be counted among the great powers the Pale King himself had to reckon with. The things that lived in that realm were swift and many and hungry, and the border between them and the rest of the kingdom was thin, and it was the Mantises, only the Mantises, who made that thin border hold. Every quiet age in which deepness stayed in deepness was an age the Mantises purchased with their endless watchfulness. The kingdom above went about its bright life, its city and its gardens and its schemes, largely unaware that its whole soft comfort rested on a wall of claws kept sharp in the green deep by a tribe most of them looked down on. That is the shape of so much guardianship. The guarded rarely know how close the danger came, or who it was that kept it back. They only know the quiet, and mistake the quiet for safety, never seeing the watchful ones who made the quiet in the first place. It is worth going a little way, in the imagination, into the dark the Mantises held back, so that the weight of their vigil can be felt properly. Deepness is a realm of near-total blackness, a tangle of tunnels and webs and pit traps, where the light of the surface world simply does not reach, and it is full of things adapted to that darkness. Swift pale hunters, and things that skitter, and things that lie in wait. Predators that have never needed eyes, because they hunt by sound, and by touch, and by patience. It is not a lawless place, exactly. It has its own order, its own ancient ruler, a powerful queen of the dark and the beasts, old enough and strong enough to be reckoned among the true powers of the world, one whose own long story is woven into the deepest fate of the kingdom. But order or not, it is a realm that presses always outward, hungry for the softer lands above, held in check only by that one thin border and the tribe that manned it. Every bug who ever slept safely in the city above, every scholar who studied in peace, every gentle soul who tended a garden, did so on the far side of a wall of claws they never saw, kept safe from a darkness they never had to look at by warriors they would likely have crossed the street to avoid. That is the true measure of what the vigil was worth. Behind the Mantises lay not an empty frontier, but a living, hungry dark. And the only thing that ever kept that dark in its place was a tribe holding a promise in the green mist, night after night, age after age, for no thanks, no reward, but the keeping of their own word. There is a gentleness worth finding, too, in the small mercies scattered through even this hard story, the moments where sorrow was allowed to complete itself and rest. Elder Hu, in the end, was granted his clarity, waking in the dream to understand at last the truth of what he had done, and released from his long delusion into 100 points of quiet light. The grieving grey mourner, who lost the traitor's daughter and carried that loss for a lifetime, was finally allowed to lay a delicate flower on her lover's grave and fade at last into rest, her mourning complete. Even these, the saddest threads, were allowed their endings, their small completions, their release. Not everyone in the fallen kingdom got that. But these did, and there is comfort in it, the sense that even in a story this heavy, sorrow was not always endless, that some griefs were allowed at last to set themselves down. A flower on a grave, a delusion lifted, 100 motes of light, small kindnesses, offered late, but offered. In a story so full of things that ended badly, These are the threads that ended gently, and it is worth holding on to them, worth letting them be the ones that stay with you as the night deepens. Not every sorrow in the deep was left to ache forever. Some were allowed at last to rest, and the ones that were shine a little brighter for how rare they were, small lights kept burning in a vast dark, proof that even here, even in the ruin of everything, a little mercy was still possible. And there is one more gentle thing to know about their respect. Once it is earned, it does not fade. The tribe does not test a worthy stranger, bow, and then forget by morning and return to hostility. Once a wanderer has proven their worth and been granted the tribe's honour, that honour holds. The warriors who would have killed the stranger on sight now let them pass freely, forever, moving through the village unharmed among fighters who have simply, permanently accepted them. There is a rare constancy in that, a respect that once given is given for good, as unbreakable as everything else about these unbreakable people. They are hard to earn and impossible to lose, and there are worse things to be. A people whose respect, once won, never wavers, is a people you can trust completely, and in a world where nearly everything else had become treacherous and mad, the Mantises remained exactly that, constant, reliable, true to their word and their judgment to the very end. And the tribe endures, quietly as the story closes around them. When the deeper purpose of the whole long journey is finally accomplished, when the infection is at last confronted at its source, and the plague begins, finally to lift from the kingdom, the Mantises are among the few who never needed saving from it in the first place. They were clean the whole time. They resisted from the beginning to the end, and whatever becomes of the kingdom after, whatever new quiet settles over the deep, the tribe that held its post through the darkest age is still there, still proud, still themselves, having outlasted the plague that emptied nearly everyone else by the simple, impossible act of refusing to be emptied. They are, in a way, the quiet triumph tucked inside the great tragedy. The one people who looked the end of the world in the face and did not look away, and did not fall. The shadow we imagine tonight, the fall that never came, throws their real survival into gentle relief. They could have fallen. Almost everyone did. They did not, and the deep is a little less dark for it, and a little more honourable, and the wall, against all the odds, still stands. There is, in that stern village, once the tribe has bowed and the danger has passed, a quiet place to rest. A simple bench, tucked among the carved stone, where a weary traveller can finally set down the long tension of the descent and simply breathe. It is a strange and wonderful thing to find a place of rest in the heart of the deadliest tribe in the deep, to sit quietly in a village that would have killed you an hour before, now surrounded by warriors who have accepted you, who will not lift a claw against you, who have judged you worthy and left you in peace. There are few safer feelings in the whole fallen kingdom than that. The safety of having earned the respect of dangerous people, of resting among the strong with their protection rather than their enmity. The Mantises do not do warmth, but they do respect completely, and respect from a tribe like that is its own kind of warmth, a hard and honest warmth that asks nothing and offers a quiet place to sit in a world that offers very few. Let that be an image to carry towards sleep, the traveller resting on a bench among warriors who have chosen not to be enemies, safe in the heart of a place built for war. And think, as the night deepens, of what their whole long vigil was for. The mantises kept their watch so that others would not have to. They held the wall against the dark so that the kingdom beyond could go about its life without ever knowing how near the beasts came. Their watchfulness was, in the end, a gift of rest to everyone else, a rest purchased by their own endless refusal to rest, their own unbroken vigilance at a post no one thanked them for. There is something in that worth holding gently at the end of a long day. Somewhere, always, someone is keeping a watch so that someone else can sleep. The wall is being held. The dark is being kept back. And tonight, the watch is not yours to keep. Tonight, you are one of the ones the vigil protects, one of the sleepers in the quiet kingdom, free to set down your own guard, because somewhere in the green deep of the story, a proud tribe is still standing at the gate, still holding the line, still keeping the beasts at bay so that the rest of the world can rest. Let the held breath out now, the long breath the whole story has been holding. The shadow we traced tonight, the fall that never came, can be released. The tribe did not become the horde. The gate did not go unguarded. The beasts did not pour through. The wall held, and the honour survived, and the proof that the dark could be resisted lived on in one proud unbroken people in the deep. All the disaster we imagined can dissolve now, gently, back into the nothing it always was. A shadow and not a fact. A possibility that the strength of the mantises quietly erased before it could ever be real. There is a deep relief in that. The relief of a danger past, of a catastrophe that stayed hypothetical, of a wall that held when everything counted on it holding. You can let the fear of it go entirely. It never happened. They did not fall. The deep is safe, in the way the deep is ever safe, because the ones who guard it did not break. So let the green mist drift, and let the village grow quiet, and let the whole long story begin to settle toward rest. The three sisters sit their thrones in the hush, watchful and calm and unbroken, keeping their patient vigil in the dark. The warriors rest at their posts, still holding, still themselves. The gate stands closed and guarded, the beasts of the deep kept back beyond it as they have always been. The memorial above the city bears its small relics, a tunic and a necklace of beads, remembering a sage who meant well and found his clarity too late. And in a far green garden, on a hidden grave smothered in vines, a delicate flower rests at last, laid there by a grief finally allowed to complete itself. All the threads of the story are settling now, each finding its quiet place, each coming gently to rest as the light dims down. Let your breathing slow now, soft and even, the way the green mist drifts through the quiet chambers of the village, unhurried, going nowhere it needs to be. There is nothing left to solve tonight. There is no wall you need to hold, no gate you need to guard, no vigil that is yours to keep. The watch is being kept by others, far down in the deep, by warriors who never tire and never break. And tonight you are simply one of the ones they protect. free to lay down every guard you have carried through the long day and rest. Let the images return gently, the way they do at the edge of sleep, drifting up and softening and settling again. The green mist in the low-lit chambers, the three sisters still and calm upon their thrones, the great gate closed and quiet, the dark held patiently back beyond it, a small stranger resting on a bench among warriors who have chosen not to be enemies, a bow offered freely, in a world that had almost forgotten how, a promise carved in stone, still kept, a vigil still holding, a wall still standing in the deep. The tribe did not fall. Let that be the last soft thought, the one to sink into. Almost everyone fell, and they did not. The plague reached for their minds and found no room, because their minds were too full of themselves, too hard, too whole, too fiercely and unbreakably their own. They kept themselves when the whole world was losing itself, and because they kept themselves, the gate held, and the dark stayed back, and honour survived in one small proud village in the green deep. The shadow we imagined never came. It was only ever a shadow. Let it dissolve now, completely, and let only the quiet remain, the infected horde that never was, the flooded kingdom that never happened, the fallen gate that stayed standing, all of it fading back into the nothing it always was, leaving only the true and gentle fact underneath, that the wall held, that the watch was kept, that the deep is safe tonight because the ones who guard it did not break. The green mist drifts, the thrones are still, the gate is closed, the vigil holds, the beasts are kept at bay. Far above, a small memorial holds a tunic and a string of beads in the quiet, and far below, in a green and hidden place, a delicate flower rests on a grave, and a long grief has finally been allowed to end. Everything is settling, everything is coming to rest. The story is folding itself gently closed around its own quiet heart. There is nothing you need to do now. There is nowhere you need to be. The watch is kept, the wall is held, the dark is guarded, far away by patient warriors who will not break, so that you, small and tired and safe, can set everything down at last and simply rest. The vigil is not yours tonight. Tonight you are only one of the sleepers the vigil protects, held in the quiet, kept safe in the dark, free to drift. Rest now. The mist is soft, and the thrones are still, and the gate is closed against the dark. The tribe holds its line so the rest of the world can sleep, and tonight the rest of the world includes you. Let your thoughts grow quiet, the way the village grows quiet, the way the deep grows quiet, the way everything grows quiet at the very end of a long day. There is nothing left but the hush and the mist and the patient unbroken watch keeping the dark at bay. Sleep now, gently, held safe in the quiet deep, while somewhere below the warriors keep their faithful watch, and the wall stands firm, and the vigil holds through the night. Whatever you were carrying can be set down now. Whatever you were guarding can rest. The watch is kept. The dark is held back. You are safe, and it is quiet, and everything can wait until morning. Good night. Rest well. The vigil holds, and you are safe within it.